Hey guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over an article titled House Husband Backlash as High-Flying Wives Ditch Men They Wanted to Stay at Home. And this article is going to go into multiple examples of where you have women that are making really good money and basically more than their husbands. And because of the demands both on the job, making the money, and the demands at home, the wives basically talk their husbands into basically being Mr. Mom, the house husband. He stays at home, raises the kids, takes care of shopping and household duties, homework, the kids, all that, which has always been traditionally more the role that the woman would do. Meanwhile, she's at the job, busting her ass, working hard, and bringing home the bacon. And what you're going to see through this article is this all starts off all fine and dandy in the beginning, but it doesn't take long before the wives all become very bitter and resentful towards their husbands because they're out all day working hard. And sure, I'm absolutely sure they're working hard, a lot of pressure, a lot on their shoulders. And they come home and their husband, in their mind, is he gets to enjoy being at home with the kids and all that. And ultimately end up ditching the guys. And these guys are typically guys that gave up their careers, their jobs, what they enjoy to do what she thought she wanted. Because as I said this before, guys, by and large, most women do not understand what they emotionally respond to. And how many times do you see women actually know what they want? In whether it be relationships, anything for that matter. I mean, shit, you try going out to dinner with a woman, how long does it take a typical woman to figure out what she wants to eat for dinner, right? But on the bigger picture things, come on. So, and also, guys, it shows exactly, it's a perfect example of the damage that the you-know-what movement and you-know-what-ism has caused. It's one thing to have, just go for equal rights, equal treatment, equal opportunities. It's another thing when this movement tries to mold the genders to be the exact opposite of the way nature designed us to be. Trying to mold boys to be more feminine and girls to be more masculine. And mold boys to take traditional female roles in the household or society, whatever it happens to be, and mold the women to do the exact opposite of what they normally do. And this article is going to show it ends in disaster, and these lives are ruined. And by the way, guys, this article is from 2007, and I chose this because, number one, it's completely relevant for today and a good thing to talk about, but also it goes to show you that awareness of this went back 13 years ago, but it's still going on today. So it's important we talk about this. You guys research these things, talk about it, so we can start reversing the trend, because it's a mess out here. All right, guys, so it starts out saying, it's the bitterness of ironies. Thousands of men who've given up work to care for their children are being ditched by their high-flying wives, who wanted them to stay at home in the first place. At the time, it seemed like a good idea. After all, Richard Dean told himself he was earning less than his wife Louise, a high-flying marketing executive. And did it really matter who was at home to look after the children? Well, that's the idea that you-know-what-ism has been trying to sell. Hey, it shouldn't matter. Well, it does matter. It matters. It may not matter so much to certain guys because men pretty much are run by logic and reasoning, while women are generally run by emotion. So even though that she may think that's what she wants in here, emotionally, it doesn't take long for it to start screwing things up in here. So she may know that the guy's at home doing all this, but it doesn't matter because of how she feels. It always boils down to how women feel. And they generally make their decisions on how they feel and also how they feel in the moment, which is not very good for very important decision making. With that in mind, it was not such a difficult decision for him to give up his career as a manager in the manufacturing industry to look after their 10-month-old son, Jack. He hoped it would bring them closer together as a family. In reality, it sounded like the death knell for their marriage. He says here, the guy's being quoted as saying, I sensed that Louise was becoming more detached and less interested in me sexually within a year of him becoming a house husband. She was always picking on me for silly little things she said I hadn't done, like the washing up or not tidying up away the toys. Does that sound familiar, guys? Any of you guys ever live with a woman, or any of you guys that are married, how often are you guys being nagged about the stupidest crap? And no matter how clean you may think your place may be in your mind, I promise you it is never good enough for her. Ever. Because I've lived with women too, so trust me, I get it. It was as if she was losing all respect for me, just because I was the one at home, doing the domestic duties. Then one day, 2 years ago, she announced she was leaving me and taking the children with her. She told me she was going to go and live with her mother 20 miles away. To say I was devastated does not do my feelings justice. It was as if the bottom had fallen out of my world. So just a couple of years into this, they switch roles. She's a breadwinner. He's taking care of everything at home, raising the kids. Sounds all good, right? Within a year, she's not sleeping with him. She's losing all respect for him, bitching and complaining, and then leaves him. Just like that. That's it. I don't love you anymore. You see what happens when the roles are reversed here? And by the way, guys, I've done videos, I'm sure many of you have seen, talking about things just like this, where the woman starts making more money, or she's the breadwinner, and she starts treating her husband like crap. She starts losing all attraction for him because basically she is in the masculine role and he is in the feminine role. And she doesn't want him to be in the feminine role. She wants to be the woman. But again, so many women were brainwashed by you-know-what-ism that they don't understand until it's too late. And this guy, his life is ruined. And the kids' lives are ruined because mom and dad are splitting up and it's a mess. So these things, thanks to the you-know-what movement, have caused nothing but disaster. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, guys, but I got to say it for new people that are watching this for the first time. For 5 years, Richard, going on to a new guy, For 5 years, Richard from Watford Herts had worked to become a perfect mother to their sons. This is the guy becoming the perfect mother. It says in quotations. Jack, who is now 9, and Edward, 7. But from the moment he gave up his job, Richard says Louise, 47, failed to see him as a man. The phenomenon of the house husband is an increasingly popular one. The number of men deciding to become house husbands has increased by a staggering 83% since 1993. According to recent figures from the Office of National Statistics, there are more than 200,000 fathers in the UK choosing to give up their careers and raise their children at home. That's a huge increase, guys. And again, this is in 2007, so I can't imagine what it's like right now. But are the couples who go down the domestic route sowing the seeds of marital disharmony? It seems that in many cases, the rise of modern career women has had an unexpected and disastrous knock-on effect on many households who assume the traditional female role. Divorce lawyer Vanessa Lloyd-Platt says that in her experience, the decision to allow the wife to be the main wage earner will have a detrimental effect on as many as half of these relationships, and that divorce statistics in these cases have risen by at least 5% in the past 2 years. So if you have the divorce attorney saying this, because she's at ground zero, she knows what's going on, and kind of giving a warning about this, that says a lot. Because she makes her living off drama and divorces and keeping the drama going. This is a quote from her. My warning would be to think long and hard about letting the man stay at home. I know it's very trendy for the wife to be the breadwinner, but my professional experience, this decision will strain the marriage. It may be fun at first to say, I have a house husband, but the wife will quickly begin to resent the fact that the man is not pulling his weight financially. Pay attention, guys. For any of you guys out there that are either just married and you haven't had any kids yet, and sooner or later, and your wife makes good money or more than you, and sooner or later the decision has to be made about this, you better pay attention, otherwise you're going to be in the same situation. And for you guys that are thinking about getting married, and I know there are plenty of you that watch this, I've warned you plenty of times about marriage. You've seen countless warnings in the comment sections about marriage. This is the shit you're going to deal with, especially if she makes a lot more money than you. So pay attention. And if you're not married, don't. It says here, this is a quote from the lawyer, she will think, you're not supporting me. Within all of us, I think there is still a very deep-seated belief that men should be the protectors. A gradual lack of respect begins to eat into the relationship, and it puts men in a very vulnerable position. The role these men are performing at home is, of course, very valuable, but women can find it very hard to recognize and respect a man who is doing it. Again, oftentimes this is the woman's idea, and the guy goes along with it thinking he's doing what she wants in the best situation, and it backfires. This is why I say women don't know what the fuck they want. It is a marital time bomb which exploded under Richard Dean's relationship with little warning. Yet he and his wife embarked on their house husband experiment with high hopes. Richard says, "Our elder son was just a baby, and I was intrigued by the thought of spending all day, every day with him. It didn't offend my masculinity at all. We'd also just moved into a bigger house, and there was a lot of renovation work to be done. So when the baby was asleep, I would don my hard hat and do some building work." Okay, now if his wife had a problem with that, she's out of her goddamn mind, because at least he's doing masculine, manly housework. That's a little better than him vacuuming and having Mr. Rogers on while his kid is watching, or whatever the hell they watch nowadays. I know my grandfather and my father could never have been house husbands, but I didn't see why there should be a social stigma in this day and age. But Richard says the balance in their relationship quickly shifted. He's quoted as saying, "I was happy to do all the cooking, cleaning, shopping, and washing, but I began to feel that Louise was taking me for granted," he says. "She'd come home exhausted after a 10-hour day, and I'd be desperate to chat, to have some adult conversation, but she said she was too tired." Well, Richard is, I'm not trying to give him a hard time, but Richard's starting to sound like a woman. How many of you guys have been in situations where you're busting your ass all day, you come home, and all you want to do is collapse, and your foot is barely in the door before all of a sudden, she's talking your ear off, and you can't even relax for 45 minutes because she's telling you everything about her goddamn day. But you can see here, he's stuck at home all day with the kid. He needs some, adult time. And she's wiped. He says he poured his heart and soul into being a good mother. That's in quotes. More so after their second son was born 2 years later. I made sure I structured my day with the children. I took them swimming, we went to the park, and did lots of activities with them, like reading and crafts. I lived and breathed those children, but not once did I regret the decision to put my career on hold. He says, yes, it's hard not making your own money, but I was doing the essential job of bringing up our children. But then the hammer blow fell, and Louise walked out, taking the boys with her. I begged her not to go. Never beg. But I think she had simply decided she could find someone more dynamic than me. He says sadly, suddenly the children I cared for since they were babies were being taken away. So again, this guy is doing what she wanted to do, what he thought, to make her happy, the most logical situation. And look what happens. Boom. I don't love you anymore. I want a divorce. And, by the way, I'm taking away the kids with me. And she's probably going to go for a guy that doesn't do any of what he just did, right? Even though it was her idea. But, to be fair here, that idea, where did that idea come from? We all know. That's why I do this channel. That's why I talk about it all the time. The dangers of the you-know-what movement and you-know-what-ism. Because we have to talk about it. Otherwise, more of this bullshit's going to continue, guys. He's quoted as saying, it's all very well to be a house husband, but she had to come to look down on me, to think of me as not very masculine and not hardworking. It was as if all the things I did around the house didn't count. That was nothing compared to how hard she had to work in her mind, which was so unfair. And it's being quoted as saying, and the great irony was that we decided together that I should stay at home with the children. Yeah, exactly. While the pain of the separation was humiliating enough, worse was to follow when Richard attempted to establish proper contact with his children. For 2 years, he fought through the family courts, desperately trying to gain full access to Jack and Edward. And at the same time, he was forced to meet maintenance payments, having effectively quit his career 5 years earlier. He had to start at the bottom all over again. Well, if she was making all the money, and this guy gave up his career to raise the kids, this guy should be getting a hefty monthly alimony payment. Okay? I don't know how things are in the UK. I don't know how they were in 2007, but here, things are starting to change here to benefit the guys, where now women are paying out alimony. And I've done a video on that months ago, and I've seen other ones, and it's pretty funny. And guess what? They're not happy about it. It's pretty funny. The moment Richard's wife said she was leaving him and taking the children, she changed her working hours from full to part-time so she could spend more time with the boys, while her mother helped with the rest of the child care. It was very cleverly done, he says. I've had to take a series of menial part-time jobs just to keep me going financially. And on top of that, I've had 2 years of solicitor's bills and taking my wife to court to get better access to the children, which has cost me at least £12,000. Richard is still desperately fighting for better access to the 2 children he did so much to raise, but now only sees them every other weekend. He says, "It's no wonder I'm suffering from stress and have gone from living in the lovely home we owned to a 2-bedroom flat in a much rougher area of town." And by the way, he's living in a rougher area of town. I guarantee you she uses that as a way to make it that the kids stay with her and he has to go to her, so the kids don't come to the rough area of town. Vanessa Lloyd Platt, the lawyer, says there's a huge problem built into the legal system, and at a time when more and more fathers are becoming primary careers for their children. There has been a massive turnaround in roles within a marriage, but there's still a very strong belief in the legal system that allows the father to have residency of the children is somehow against the natural order of things. And many judges still believe the children will be better off with their mother. Not if she's a nutcase, or not if she's a bitch. And if these guys are doing all this on their end, it's got to change. I hope it has changed. I don't know how it is in the UK now. And you guys that are from the UK that are watching me, let me know in the comment section, because I'm definitely curious how things are in the family courts towards men in this situation. It's a conundrum which is all too familiar to 46-year-old James Thompson, who works as a mechanical engineer, but prior to this was a stay-at-home father to his 3 daughters, Alice, 14, Chloe, 11, and Amy, 8. He lives in Manchester, and like Richard, he found that his marriage to Angela, a 43-year-old who runs her communications company, began to crumble once he had given up his job. James says, "We made the decision that I should stay at home when Alice was 18 months old. Angela was earning twice as much as I was. Up to that point, we had a childminder, but it felt as if neither of us were spending much time with our child." He says, "We made the decision." We all know who made that decision. It wasn't him. He just went along with it because he thought that's what he thought she wanted to do to make her happy. Guys, we got to start, those of you who are married, relationships, all that, you got to do what makes you happy, okay? And you got to stand firm on your principles. And articles like this prove exactly what happens when you don't. Alice would scream when we dropped her off with the childminder, so it was obvious that all was not well. We then had a 2-week family holiday in Greece and talked about the future. It became obvious that by that time we paid a childminder and both of our petrol costs, there wasn't a lot left for my wage. It actually made financial sense for me to be at home. To my surprise, I slipped into the role with real ease. I shopped, cleaned, washed, and cared for Alice, and then Chloe and Amy once they came along. Alice was a childminder for just under a year before I gave up my job, and I was a house husband for about 11 years until we split. And I'm willing to bet you that during those 11 years, he probably could count on his hand how many times he had sex. James says that the house husband 12 years ago, he was very much in the minority, and many mothers were very distrustful of him. There weren't many couples doing this when we first made the decision, and I think some other mothers thought I was trying to seduce them when I chat to them at coffee mornings and play groups, he says. In the park, they'd be sitting chatting to each other while I rushed around physically playing with my kids, and they ignored me. Then when my wife came home, she'd plonk herself down in the chair, put on the TV, read a magazine, and ignore me. 2, while I was still running around with the children. Role reversal. I suppose I did resent this, but I thought that there was a trade-off. The children meant the world to me. But then in 2005, our relationship broke down completely. We were hardly talking to each other, and she was spending longer and longer out of the house. It's very possible she was having an affair. One day, she came home suddenly and told me that she didn't love me anymore, and she was fed up with me being the main being the main breadwinner. And again, this was her idea. It came out of the blue to me. We jointly agreed that this was the best plan. And it was as if the rug was being pulled out from under my feet to be told that she was not happy and deeply resented having to earn all the money. Again, this was her idea. But here's the thing, guys. For those of you in relationships that may have experienced this, she didn't decide this out of the blue. This has been building a long time. And there are lots and lots of clues out there, but most guys are completely blind to this. So those of you guys that do relationships, you have to understand it's not going to just, if up and out of the blue, your girl, wife, whatever it happens to be, says, I don't love you anymore and I want out, believe me, she's been playing this a long time. And I guarantee you that she has a replacement already lined up. Guaranteed. So you got to pay attention to these things and see it coming. That way you can be a little more prepared. And that way then, you're not blindsided. Further arguments followed, and over the course of several months, they got more and more heated until, in the end, I told her to pack her bags and get out if she was so miserable. Well, good for you. At first, the children stayed with me and she visited them. But then she took me to court. As both Richard and James were to discover, the British courts still favor the mother when it comes to deciding where the children should live in divorce cases, even if the father had previously been the primary career. James has 50-50 care of his children. He has them for 1 week, his wife the next. He says, I suppose I should be grateful that I have a half share in my children, but it doesn't feel like that to me at all. I miss them so much, he says. I just have to put up with it, little time I have with them now, and be grateful for that. James says it's madness that in this day and age, fathers do not have more rights over their children. I think it's appalling that courts should be able to rule that a father's needs are somehow less than those of a woman. Just because someone gave birth to the children doesn't mean they love them more. I agree with that. He says, I cope by working very long shifts when my children aren't here, and my company has been really helpful in understanding and letting me work flexible hours when I need to pick them up from school. Well, that's great. This guy's situation is a lot better than the other guy's situation that I was reading a few minutes ago. That guy's really in a shitty situation. And here's another story real quick. David Williams, 48, from Cardiff, is still fighting his wife, Mandy, 39 years old, for custody of their 4-year-old daughter, Alexandra, after they split up 2 years ago. He used to work in social services, which means he didn't make a lot of money, but is now retired through ill health. His wife used to work as an administration officer, but has given up full-time work to care for their daughter. Like Richard and James, he feels much of his masculinity and power in the relationship was lost when he gave up his job to become a house husband. It's ironic, given that for hundreds of years, women have been perceived solely as housewives and mothers, and yet their role has been regarded as essential to society, and they have been respected and valued for it, he says. But once I gave up my career, I lost prestige both in society and the eyes of my wife. It was as if I had no value. See, guys, this keeps coming up over and over and over again. There were times in our marriage when I felt as if I was being treated like a subservient Victorian housewife. I'd be criticized if the washing wasn't hung out exactly how my wife wanted it to be, and she used to check to make sure that I had cleaned the house perfectly, checking for dust and badly washed plates. My wife was a real control freak, and she wanted everything to be done perfectly. Women's standards about how the house should be cleaned is completely different than guys. It's amazing. My standards weren't good enough, even though I had run a house perfectly successfully on my own before I met her. I spent my days cooking and cleaning, as well as doing everything for our daughter. David is still very bitter about the outcome of their divorce. Even though I had been looking after my daughter for 2 years, when it came to our divorce, The judge assumed my wife should be the one to have custody of our child, just because she's a mother, he says. This was despite the fact she was working full-time and I had been the primary carer. Now that she has full custody of Alexandra, she works part-time from home. It is a situation that makes me weep. I miss my daughter so much. Yeah, that really sucks. He now lives alone in the little cottage he owned before he married and sees Alexandra only once every other week. She lives 110 miles away from me, away from the friends she made when she lived in our village and my family. 110 miles, that's a long distance. That sucks. I'm allowed to see her for 2 weekends a month. That means a round trip for me of more than 200 miles. It is annihilating me, both emotionally and physically. And that's bullshit. I feel bad for this guy. If current trends are anything to go by, the number of men deciding to become house husbands is set to rise even more dramatically. But how many of those men who do not start out by regarding themselves as paragons of sensitive modern manhood will all end up wishing they had never left the office at all? So guys, the lesson from this article, and I know this is a long video, is don't do that. Period. So if you guys are married and you haven't kids yet and you're thinking about it and your wife makes more money, for God's sakes, do not go along with this plan. It's going to end up in a disaster. It could take 10 or 11 years like this one guy I was reading about, but it's going to happen. And don't even do it. Or for you guys that are thinking about getting married, and by the way, if you're thinking about getting married, I say you don't do that. Please watch my videos, learn from them, and you'll learn not to get married. But those of you are married and think you're going to go down this road, best thing you can do, so you can say you did it, is have this discussion with your wife and basically tell her, look, studies have shown, the statistics are there, that going down that route with the woman making all the money and the guy being the house husband leads in disaster. And you don't want that. And you can at least say that you presented these facts. And if she doesn't go along with it, you got a few choices. You can either go along with her agenda and likely have the same thing happen to you, or you basically lay down the law and say it ain't going to happen. Or you get out. But again, guys, if you're single, you don't have to put up with this bullshit. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. And I will catch you next time.